The sound of metal scraping against the earth interrupted Miles's thoughts as he dug behind the barn. The Texas sun bore down upon him, unforgiving, casting a harsh light on the familiar landscape. He had noticed a peculiar sunken patch earlier, something that struck him as odd beneath the sprawling blue sky. It was just a little dip. He thought maybe it was erosion, something easily fixed. But as he continued to dig, the resistance of the soil shifted, pulling him deeper into a world of uncertainty. Suddenly his shovel hit something hard. It was heavy, buried deep, and the familiar smell of damp earth filled his lungs, mixing with the dust of the day. Curiosity surged within him as he cleared away the dirt, revealing a rusted toolbox, the kind mechanics used back in the 70s. The sight sent a chill down his spine. What was it doing here, hidden away behind his barn? He pried the lid open, and damp, musty air wafted out like the breath of a forgotten past. Inside lay a tangle of papers, a broken watch, and a leather wallet. Miles's heart raced as the name embossed on the wallet sent a shock through him. Jacob Mercer. The name stirred whispers and raised eyebrows in town, a man who had vanished without a trace in 1976. It was a name that had long since faded into the background of small-town chatter, a ghost that haunted conversations but was never directly confronted. Miles, a 54-year-old cattle rancher accustomed to silence and solitude, had always kept his distance from town gossip. He preferred the company of his cattle to the murmurs of people who thrived on drama. Years ago, he had promised himself he wouldn't delve into other people's troubles. But this discovery was different. This wasn't just a relic. It was a piece of someone's life frozen in time, a life that had been lost and buried. Standing there, heart pounding, he contemplated what to do. Should he ignore it and cover it back up? Should he bury the past deeper like the earth had? Or was it time to bring the truth to light, no matter how painful? The weight of responsibility settled on his shoulders like the heavy Texas air. He could feel the ground beneath him shift from solid earth to a quagmire of ethical dilemmas. Taking a deep breath, he fished his phone from his pocket and dialed 911. His voice was steady, but his hands trembled as he spoke to the operator, the words tumbling out like the dirt he had just unearthed. As he reported the find, the distance between him and the truth seemed to close in, like the rising heat of the Texas sun. Would this discovery bring peace for a family left in limbo, or stir up a storm of secrets best left undisturbed? As he hung up the phone, the distant sound of sirens began to echo in the stillness of the ranch. Miles looked at the toolbox, half buried in the dirt, and wondered if this discovery would bring closure, or if it would unearth stories that were meant to stay hidden. Dust swirled around him, and he realized he was no longer just a rancher. He was now a keeper of secrets, standing at the crossroads of past and present. In the small town near Abilene, life moved with a slow, steady rhythm. Mornings unfolded like a well-rehearsed play, with townsfolk gathering at the local diner, the heart of their community, for coffee that was always stronger than the bitter truths whispered over the steam. The clatter of dishes and the hum of conversations filled the air, creating an atmosphere that felt both comforting and familiar. Miles, a man of few words, often sat at the counter, nodding at the familiar faces, neighbors who knew him, yet didn't know his heart. He rose early most mornings, the air fresh with the scent of dew and earth. With the sun peeking over the horizon, casting golden hues across the pastures, he would head out to tend to his cattle, each moo and lowing calling back memories of simpler times. The ranch was his sanctuary, a place where he found solace among his animals, where the weight of the world felt a little lighter. It was a comforting cycle that kept the chaos of life at bay. But the past was a persistent shadow. Miles often thought of his own father, a man as tough as the land they worked. He instilled in him the values of hard work, responsibility, and most importantly, keeping one's nose out of others' affairs. Live and let live, his father used to say. Would that continue to hold true if the truth lay buried just behind his barn? As he leaned against the fence watching the cattle graze, he recalled the conversations about Jacob Mercer, talk that had faded into hushed tones over the years. Jacob had been something of a ghost, his disappearance a dark cloud that loomed over conversations at the diner, especially during the hot summer evenings when cicadas sang their ballads. The mystery surrounded Mercer like a thick fog, and Miles had always kept his distance, choosing not to let curiosity lead him down a road he had vowed to avoid. The toolbox, with its contents now a relentless reminder, nagged at his conscience. Each document he had glimpsed felt like a fragment of a puzzle, hinting at a life once lived, now reduced to a mere whisper. With every day, he found himself returning to it, brushing off dirt and debris, desperate to piece together the story it held. He could hear the faint crackle of the radio in the barn, playing an old country tune that felt out of place amid the turmoil swirling within him. The warmth of the sun hung heavy on his skin, but the air around him seemed to shift, thickening with unspoken words. What was he supposed to do with the information he had unearthed? Days turned into weeks, and the weight of the discovery lingered. He continued his daily routines, but his mind was often elsewhere, wandering through the fragments of Jacob's life. Miles felt the eyes of the town upon him, a simmering curiosity that went unspoken but was palpable. Each encounter felt heavy with unasked questions, drawing him deeper into a world he had long avoided. One evening, as the sun dipped below the horizon, painting the sky in hues of orange and purple, Miles found himself at the diner again. The familiar sounds of laughter and chatter surrounded him, but the warmth felt tinged with tension. He scanned the faces seated around him, searching for someone who might hold a piece of Jacob's story. He listened intently as stories unfolded around him. Old friends reminisced about days gone by, sharing tales of lost opportunities and faded dreams. Among the laughter, he caught snippets of conversations about Jacob. People spoke of him fondly, recalling a man full of potential, a hard-working soul who had vanished without a trace. "Miles, how's the ranching these days?" a voice called, breaking him from his reverie. It was Betty, the diner's owner, her hands on her hips and a warm smile on her face. "It's all right, Betty." "Just the same old routine," he replied, forcing a smile. "But I've been thinking about the past a bit more than usual lately." Betty raised an eyebrow, leaning closer. "The past can be a heavy load, you know, especially in a town like ours. You hear stories and they stick with you even if you try to shake them off." He nodded, feeling the weight of her words settle in. "I found something the other day. A toolbox buried behind the barn. It belonged to Jacob." Her expression shifted, a mixture of surprise and concern crossing her face. "Jacob? That's a name I haven't heard in a long time. What was in it?" Miles hesitated, contemplating whether to share the details, but the pull of curiosity was too strong. Documents, a wallet, a watch, it feels like a piece of his life stuck back there. I don't know whether to let it be or dig deeper. "I think you might want to dig deeper," she said thoughtfully, her voice low. Jacob's disappearance left a mark on this town, even after all these years. There are stories that need to be told, Miles. Perhaps it's time to bring some of those stories back to light. Her words resonated with him. "You're right. I've been feeling this weight, like I'm supposed to do something with what I've found." As the days passed, Miles worked tirelessly to gather information. He spoke to old friends, family members, and even the local historian who had an encyclopedic knowledge of the town's history. Each conversation brought new insights, weaving together a mosaic of Jacob's life that had been interrupted. He learned about Jacob's family, his father, a stern man, and his mother, known for her kindness. Jacob had been a dreamer, full of aspirations to leave the small town behind. His dreams had been cut short, leaving a void that haunted those who had known him. With each new detail, Miles felt the weight of responsibility grow heavier. He could no longer remain silent. The truth was out there, waiting to be revealed, and it was time for the townspeople to confront the specter of Jacob Mercer together. One afternoon, after a visit to the library where he pored over old newspapers, Miles found himself back in the diner. He sat at the counter, fresh coffee warming his hands, as he considered his next move. The bell above the door chimed, and a few familiar faces entered, friends who had known Jacob in his youth. As they settled into their seats, their laughter filled the air, but to Miles it felt tinged with nostalgia. He listened closely, catching snippets of their conversation. They reminisced about the good times they had shared with Jacob, the pranks they pulled, the dreams they spun together. "Do you remember when Jacob tried to fix that old truck of his?" One man chuckled. "He thought he could make it run again, but all it did was sputter and die." Another woman chimed in. "He had such big plans, said he wanted to drive to California and see the ocean. I always wondered if he ever made it." Miles felt a pang in his chest, recognizing the bittersweet nature of their fond memories. "He never got the chance," he murmured under his breath. They turned to him, their smiles fading as they glanced at him. "Miles," one of the men said, a look of understanding in his eyes, "you found something, didn't you?" He nodded slowly. "A toolbox. It belonged to Jacob. I think it's time to talk about him again." The atmosphere shifted, the lively chatter quieting as they turned their full attention to him. "What do you mean?" a woman asked, her voice laced with curiosity and concern. "I found some papers, a wallet, a watch." "It's like Jacob's life was waiting for someone to uncover it," he replied, urgency spilling out. "I know it's been years since he disappeared, but I think we owe it to him to remember, to confront what happened." Silence hung in the air, thick with disbelief and contemplation. Finally, a man spoke, his voice low. "You're right. I've spent too many years pretending it doesn't matter. It's time we faced it. We can't let Jacob's name fade away like he did." Miles felt a sense of relief wash over him. "I want to organize a gathering. Let's all come together and talk about Jacob, share what we remember. Maybe we can find closure for everyone who was left behind." As the group nodded in agreement, a wave of camaraderie swept through them. It was as if the burden of Jacob's disappearance had begun to lift, the shared memories intertwining their lives once more. In the days leading to the gathering, Miles worked tirelessly, posting flyers and inviting anyone who had known Jacob to join them for a night of remembrance. When the night arrived, he stood at the front of the hall, heart racing. The atmosphere was heavy with anticipation as old friends and acquaintances filled the seats, their faces a patchwork of emotions. After a few moments, Miles stepped up to the podium, his hands trembling slightly. "Thank you all for coming tonight. We're here to remember Jacob Mercer, a man who meant so much to many of us. His disappearance has left a void in our community, and I believe it's time we confronted that void together." As he spoke, he noticed the tears in the eyes of those gathered. Slowly, hands began to raise as people shared their stories, tales of Jacob's laughter, his dreams, and the impact he had on their lives. Each memory wove a thread of connection among them, drawing them closer together. By the end of the evening, Miles felt a sense of renewal wash over him. The gathering had become a cathartic release, a chance to let go of the pain that had lingered in the shadows for too long. As the last stories were shared, he realized they had not only honored Jacob's memory, they had begun to heal the wounds left behind. In the days that followed, the town began to change. The air felt lighter, filled with a newfound sense of community. People began to reconnect, sharing their own stories and addressing the past with open hearts. Miles felt a sense of purpose swelling within him, knowing that he had played a part in rekindling the bonds that had frayed over the years. With each passing day, he found himself returning to the toolbox, brushing off dirt and debris, desperate to piece together the story it held. The documents were a jigsaw of lives intertwined, a testament to a time long forgotten. He couldn't ignore the sensations, the whispering doubts and quiet urgings that came from deep within. The sirens that had once been a distant echo now felt like a ticking clock, reminding him that time was running out. The townspeople's curiosity simmered beneath the surface, their eyes darting toward him with unspoken questions. Although the gathering had brought some closure, Miles understood that the journey was far from over. One evening, as the sun dipped below the horizon and painted the sky in rich hues of orange and purple, Miles sat on his porch, contemplating the decision he faced. The distant hum of a train echoed, a reminder of the world outside his ranch, a world that had moved on while Jacob's story remained frozen in time. He felt the wind shift, a whisper through the trees, urging him to act. The weight on his conscience pressed harder, and he knew he could no longer stay silent. Calling 911 had been just the beginning. Now it was time to confront the past, to face the legacy of a man who had been lost to time. Miles's heart raced as he prepared himself for the inevitable conversations that would follow. Would the truth bring closure, or would it open wounds that had long since healed? As the stars began to twinkle above, he felt a sense of resolve wash over him. He was ready to uncover what lay beneath the surface, not just for Jacob, but for himself and the community that had once embraced him. With a deep breath, he stood up, brushing the dirt from his hands, and looked toward the horizon. It was time to bring the past to light, to unearth the stories that had long been buried, and to reveal the truth hidden beneath the surface. No longer would Jacob's name be just a whisper in the wind. It would become a voice, echoing through the hearts of the people who once knew him. As the days turned into a blur of anticipation, Miles felt the weight of his discovery pressing down on him, heavier than the Texas sun. The toolbox sat in his barn like a dormant volcano, each piece inside it a potential eruption of memories, secrets, and unresolved questions. He had spent countless hours pondering Jacob Mercer's disappearance, trying to understand the man behind the whispers. The gathering had brought the community together, but it had only scratched the surface. He needed to dig deeper, not just into the earth, but into the hearts of those around him. One warm afternoon, Miles found himself in town, the summer heat radiating off the pavement. The air was thick with the scent of fresh-cut grass and the distant sound of cicadas, their relentless chorus a reminder of the season's passage. He parked his old pickup truck outside the diner, the familiar clatter of dishes and the sizzle of bacon reaching his ears. As he walked in, the chatter hushed momentarily, eyes turning to him with a mix of curiosity and concern. "Miles!" Betty called from behind the counter, her hands still busy preparing orders. "Are you coming to join us for lunch?" "Just a quick cup of coffee, if you don't mind," he replied, taking a seat at the counter. He could feel the weight of the diner's gaze on him, a collective consciousness that seemed to whisper questions he wasn't yet ready to answer. As he sipped his coffee, he overheard snippets of conversations around him, town gossip intertwined with stories of the past. Jacob's name surfaced occasionally, a ghost weaving through the fabric of their discussions. Miles strained to listen, his heart racing as he caught words like disappearance, search parties, and what happened to him. It was as if the very air crackled with unresolved tension, a storm brewing just beneath the surface. "Got a lot on your mind, don't you?" Betty said, placing a plate of pancakes in front of him. "You've been awfully quiet lately." "Just thinking," Miles admitted, his voice low. "About Jacob. I feel like there's more to uncover." She nodded knowingly, her expression shifting to one of understanding. "You know, a lot of folks still think about him. His family never really recovered after he went missing. It's like they lost their anchor." The mention of Jacob's family sparked something within Miles. He had been so focused on the mystery of Jacob's life that he hadn't considered the impact of his disappearance on those left behind. "Do you know where they are now?" he asked, a sense of urgency creeping into his voice. "Last I heard, his parents moved out of town after a few years," Betty replied, her gaze drifting toward the window. "It was just too painful for them to stay here. They needed to find a fresh start." "Do you think they'd be willing to talk about him?" Miles asked, his mind racing with possibilities. "Maybe it could help bring some closure." "They might be willing," she said, her tone cautious. "But be prepared. Some people aren't ready to relive that pain." After finishing his coffee, Miles made his way to the door, determination coursing through him. He knew he had to reach out to Jacob's family, to understand their perspective, to hear their stories. It was a necessary step in his journey toward unearthing the truth. That evening, as the sun dipped below the horizon, casting long shadows across the land, Miles sat on his porch, his mind racing with thoughts of Jacob and his family. He retrieved an old notebook from the house, jotting down questions he wanted to ask. What Jacob was like, their fondest memories of him, the day he vanished, and how it had affected their lives. With a deep breath, he picked up his phone and dialed the number he had found through some loose connections in town. After a few rings, a voice answered, tentative yet familiar. "Hello? Is this Mrs. Mercer?" he asked, his heart racing. "Yes, this is she replied, her voice soft and cautious. "Mrs. Mercer, my name is Miles. I'm a rancher near Abilene. I found something that belonged to Jacob, his toolbox. I wanted to reach out because I think it's time to talk about him." There was a brief silence on the other end, a pause that felt heavy with emotion. "Jacob," she finally said, her voice breaking. "It's been so long since anyone spoke his name." "I'm sorry to bring up painful memories," Miles said gently, "but I believe it's important. I'd love to hear about him if you're willing to share." After a moment's hesitation, she agreed to meet. They arranged a time for the following weekend, and as Miles hung up the phone, he felt a mixture of anxiety and anticipation. He was about to step into a story that had been left unfinished for far too long. The days leading up to their meeting felt like an eternity. Miles prepared himself, wrestling with the emotions that bubbled to the surface. He thought about Jacob, the life he had lived, the dreams he had harbored, and the silence that had enveloped his existence after he disappeared. When the day arrived, Miles drove to a small house on the outskirts of town. The road was lined with wildflowers, vibrant against the backdrop of dry grass and dusty earth. He parked in front of the home and took a moment to collect his thoughts before stepping out. As he approached the door, he noticed the weathered paint and the creaking porch steps, evidence of time passing without mercy. He knocked, and after a few moments, Mrs. Mercer answered, her face etched with years of sorrow, yet still radiating warmth. "Hello, Miles," she said, her voice soft and inviting. "Please come in." The inside of the house felt like a time capsule, filled with remnants of a life once vibrant. Family photos adorned the walls, evidence of joy intertwined with the weight of loss. He could sense the love that had once flourished here, now overshadowed by the absence of Jacob. They settled in the living room, and Miles felt the tension in the air, a palpable reminder of the pain that lingered. "Thank you for meeting with me," he began, his voice steady. "I know this must be difficult." Mrs. Mercer nodded, her gaze drifting to a framed photograph of Jacob on the mantel. "It's been a long time since I've spoken about him. I've carried this weight for so many years." "I can't imagine how hard it must be," Miles said gently, "but I believe it's important to share his story. I found his toolbox, and it felt like a sign. There's so much about him I want to understand." As she began to speak, Miles leaned forward, his heart aching at the memories that began to flow. Jacob was full of life, she recalled, her eyes glistening with tears. "He had dreams, you know. He wanted to travel, see the world. He was always curious about everything." "What do you remember about the day he went missing?" Miles asked gently, feeling the gravity of her memories unraveling before him. "It was a hot summer day," she said, her voice trembling. "He was working on his truck. I remember he was so excited to finally get it running. But then, he never came back." Her voice broke, and she looked away, wiping away tears. "We searched everywhere. The whole town came together, but he was just gone." Miles felt the weight of her words. "That must have been devastating for you and your husband." "It was," she admitted. "We never truly recovered. We left town because it felt too painful to stay, to see the empty spaces where he should have been." The conversation flowed like a river, each story revealing fragments of Jacob's life, his goofy sense of humor, the way he helped neighbors without being asked, and his dreams that were so vivid and alive. As Mrs. Mercer spoke, Miles could feel the bond between them tightening, a shared understanding of loss and longing. "I want to honor his memory," Miles said, voice firm. "I believe he deserves to be remembered, and I think the town needs to hear his story. Would you be willing to share your memories at a gathering?" Mrs. Mercer looked at him, her expression a mix of surprise and hope. "You think people would want to hear about him?" "I believe they would. Jacob's disappearance has lingered over this town for too long. It's time to bring his story into the light," he replied, feeling a sense of urgency. After a moment of contemplation, she nodded. "If it would help others, then yes. I'd like to be part of that." As they continued to talk, Miles felt a sense of purpose grow within him. He had taken the first step toward unearthing the truth about Jacob, and the road ahead felt clearer. Each revelation felt like a thread woven into a larger tapestry, connecting all who had been affected by Jacob's life and death. When the conversation finally came to a close, Miles left Mrs. Mercer's home with a heavy heart, but a sense of hope blossoming within him. He had not only uncovered the memories of a man who had been lost, but had begun to mend the wounds that had festered in the community. The toolbox would no longer be just an artifact, it would become a symbol of remembrance and healing. Back at his ranch, Miles spent the following days organizing the gathering. He reached out to the local church for support, and Betty helped him spread the word, encouraging anyone who had known Jacob to come and share their stories. As the day of the gathering approached, he felt a mix of excitement and anxiety. Would the townspeople be willing to confront the past? Would they embrace the opportunity to remember Jacob, or would they shy away from the painful memories? On the evening of the gathering, Miles stood at the front of the church hall, heart racing as he looked out at the crowd. The atmosphere felt charged with emotion, a mix of anticipation and trepidation. Familiar faces filled the seats, friends, family, and neighbors who had once shared laughter with Jacob. He cleared his throat, stepping up to the podium. "Thank you all for coming tonight. We're here to honor the memory of Jacob Mercer, a man who meant so much to so many of us. His disappearance has left a void in our community, and I believe it's time we confronted that void together." As he spoke, Miles felt the weight of their gazes upon him, a mix of curiosity and longing. He could see the glimmer of recognition in their eyes, the unspoken memories that stirred just beneath the surface. The gathering began, and one by one, people began to share their stories, tales of Jacob's laughter, his dreams, and the impact he had on their lives. Each memory felt like a thread weaving them together, drawing them closer as they confronted the past. A woman stood, her voice trembling as she recounted their last conversation. "I remember he was so excited about his plans," she said, wiping away tears. "He wanted to take a road trip to California, to see the ocean. I never thought it would be the last time I'd see him." With each new story shared, the atmosphere in the room shifted. The pain of Jacob's absence began to transform into something warmer, a sense of connection, a shared understanding of loss that allowed them to breathe a little easier. As the night wore on, Miles felt a sense of hope bloom within him. This gathering, born of sorrow, was becoming a celebration of Jacob's life. It was a reminder that even in the darkest shadows, there could be light. And then, as if the universe had conspired to bring them together, Mrs. Mercer stood up, her presence commanding the room. "I want to share something," she said, her voice steady yet soft. The room fell silent, everyone turning to her, captivated. "I've carried Jacob's memory in my heart for so long," she began. "But tonight I want to celebrate him. He was a dreamer, a kind soul who touched so many lives. I hope we can continue to remember him, to keep his spirit alive in our hearts." With that, she shared stories of Jacob's childhood, his dreams, and the vibrant life he had lived before he vanished. As she spoke, tears flowed freely, but smiles emerged too, each laugh resonating like echoes of a life that had been cherished. As the evening came to a close, Miles looked around the room, feeling a sense of unity among the townspeople. They had come together to confront the past, to honor a man who had been lost, and in doing so, they had begun to heal. The weight of their shared grief was lifting, replaced by a collective determination to remember Jacob and to keep his spirit alive. Finally, as the last guests began to leave, Miles stood at the door, shaking hands and exchanging hugs. The warmth of the community enveloped him, a reminder that they were no longer alone in their grief. Together they had begun to rewrite the narrative of the past, turning sorrow into solace. As he closed the door behind the last guest, Miles felt a sense of closure wash over him. The truth had emerged from the shadows, and in doing so, it had brought the community closer together. He knew the road ahead would still hold challenges, but he felt a renewed sense of purpose. With the toolbox as a tangible piece of Jacob's life, Miles felt ready to continue the journey of discovery. The echoes of the past would guide him, reminding him of the importance of connection, of remembering those we have lost. That night, as the stars twinkled above, he sat on his porch reflecting on the evening's events. The weight that had once hung over him felt lighter now, as if the very earth beneath him had exhaled. He took a deep breath, feeling a profound sense of hope. Jacob Mercer's story would not be forgotten. It would continue to resonate through the hearts of those who loved him. As he closed his eyes, the sound of the wind whispered through the trees, a gentle reminder that sometimes the past needs to be unearthed, not only to honor those who came before us, but to guide us toward a brighter future. The air buzzed with anticipation as Miles stood at the front of the church hall, the weight of Jacob Mercer's story pressing down on him. Tonight was not just another gathering. It was a pivotal moment for the community, a chance to confront the shadows of the past and honor the memory of a man whose life had been cut short. He felt a surge of determination as he prepared to address the crowd before him. "Thank you all for being here tonight," Miles began, his voice steady yet filled with emotion. "We're here to remember Jacob, not just as a name lost to time, but as a vibrant person who touched the lives of many. His disappearance left a void in our community, and it's time we confront that together." As he spoke, he could see the faces of his neighbors, reflecting a mix of curiosity, sorrow, and hope. They had come together to share their memories, but now they were ready to take action, to seek answers where there had been silence for too long. "I've spent the last few weeks digging into Jacob's past," Miles continued, pacing slightly as he looked across the room. "I've spoken to his family and collected stories from those who knew him. What I've learned has been both heartbreaking and inspiring. Jacob was a dreamer. He had plans for his future, and we owe it to him to uncover the truth of what happened." Murmurs rippled through the crowd as people exchanged glances. Miles took a deep breath, feeling the collective energy in the room. "Recently, I learned from a former resident that she overheard some men talking about Jacob just before he disappeared. Their words were filled with anger, as if they were plotting something against him. I believe this could be the missing piece we need." The tension in the air thickened as everyone processed the implications of his words. Miles could see their minds racing, the wheels turning as they began to piece together the past. "I propose we reach out to local law enforcement," he suggested. "We need to revisit the case to see if they have any leads or records we can pursue. This is not just about Jacob anymore. It's about ensuring that no one else is lost in silence." A woman in the front row stood up, her voice trembling yet strong. "I remember that day. I was at the diner too, and I overheard those men. They sounded suspicious, but I didn't think anything of it at the time. I wish I had said something." "Your voice matters," Miles replied, his heart racing at the willingness to speak out. "If we all come together, we can bring light to this darkness." "Jacob deserves that, and so do we." The room buzzed with renewed energy as more people began to share their recollections. Old stories flowed like a river, intertwining and creating a tapestry of Jacob's life that had once felt fragmented. Each person who stepped forward added a piece to the puzzle, their voices rising in unity as they collectively mourned and celebrated Jacob's memory. As the evening progressed, Miles felt a sense of purpose swell within him. They were not just remembering a man, they were reclaiming their community, confronting the pain that had silenced them for too long. The toolbox was no longer just a relic of the past. It had become a symbol of hope, a reminder that the truth could still be unearthed. After the gathering, as people trickled out of the hall, Miles lingered, feeling the momentum of their shared determination. He had spoken with several individuals who were willing to help investigate further, and he sensed that this was the beginning of something significant. In the following days, he contacted the local sheriff's department, eager to share the new insights they had gathered. He met with the sheriff, who listened intently as Miles recounted the conversations he had held with the townspeople. "I believe there are details here that were overlooked," Miles said passionately. "We need to revisit Jacob's case with fresh eyes." The sheriff nodded, a thoughtful expression crossing his face. "You're right. It's worth pursuing. We can dig through the old case files, see if there are any leads we might have missed." Together, they pored over boxes of documents, the air thick with the weight of history. Each paper held the promise of answers, and Miles felt a rush of adrenaline as he examined the details. "Here," the sheriff exclaimed suddenly, pointing to a notation in the file. "There's mention of a witness who saw Jacob near the old railway tracks a few days before he went missing. This could be a lead worth following." Excitement coursed through Miles as they began to uncover more details about that fateful time. They traced the witness's last known location, eventually tracking him down in a nearby town. After more coordination and planning, they arranged to meet the man who remembered Jacob vividly. "He was a good kid, always smiling, but I remember the day I saw him near the tracks. There were some shady characters around, guys I didn't recognize," he explained, his brow furrowing with concern. "It just didn't feel right." "What do you mean by shady?" Miles asked, leaning closer. "They looked rough, like they were up to no good. Jacob seemed nervous, like he sensed something was off. I didn't think much of it at the time. After all, it was just a kid working on his truck. But now," his voice trailed off, the weight of regret palpable. Miles felt a knot tighten in his stomach. This information could change everything. "Thank you for sharing this with us," he said, his heart racing. "We're working to piece together the timeline, and your insight is invaluable." As they left the man's home, Miles felt the urgency grow. Each new piece of information brought them closer to understanding what had happened to Jacob. He was no longer just an unresolved case. He was a young man with a story that needed to be told. With the community rallying behind him, Miles felt a renewed sense of hope. The toolbox had become a beacon guiding them toward the truth. The conversations they had shared, the memories they had unearthed, these were not just remnants of the past, they were threads weaving a new narrative for the future. As Miles prepared for the next gathering, he reflected on the journey they had undertaken. The gathering would offer an opportunity to share the new information they had uncovered and to invite more people to join in the investigation. On the night of the meeting, the hall buzzed with excitement. The local sheriff joined him, ready to share the details they had gathered. As Miles stood before the crowd, he felt the weight of their shared stories resting on his shoulders. "We've made significant progress," he began, his voice firm. "We now have more clues that could lead us closer to finding out what truly happened to Jacob." The crowd listened intently as he and the sheriff recounted the witness's account and the new leads they had pursued. "Tonight I want to ask for your help," he continued. "If anyone remembers anything, any detail, no matter how small, please come forward. Together, we can bring Jacob's story into the light." As discussions unfolded, people began to share their memories, each story adding depth to the investigation. The atmosphere buzzed with determination, and Miles felt a sense of hope swell within him. Jacob's memory was alive and vibrant, and the community was ready to embrace it. By the end of the evening, Miles could see the transformation taking place. The crowd felt more connected than ever, united in their pursuit of truth. They were no longer just a collection of individuals mourning a loss. They were a community determined to reclaim their shared history. With renewed energy, Miles returned home, the echoes of their gathering still resonating in his heart. He knew the road ahead would be challenging, but he felt a sense of purpose guiding him forward. Together, they had begun to uncover the truth, and Jacob Mercer's story would not end in silence. It would continue to resonate, reminding them all of the importance of memory, connection, and the power of hope. In the quiet of the night, as the stars twinkled above, Miles closed his eyes, feeling the warmth of the community surrounding him. They were embarking on a journey together, one that would honor Jacob's memory and lead them toward the truth they had all been seeking. The winds of change were blowing, and with each passing day they were one step closer to unveiling the secrets that had long been buried in the shadows. As the days turned into weeks, Miles felt a growing urgency. The investigation into Jacob Mercer's disappearance had transformed from a personal quest into a community mission. The toolbox, once a relic of sorrow, had become a symbol of hope and resilience. With each new lead and shared memory, the townspeople grew more united in their determination to uncover the truth. Miles maintained close communication with the sheriff, and together they pursued every potential lead. There were afternoons spent combing through old case files, late evenings filled with phone calls to former residents, and weekend gatherings where people shared their stories. Slowly, a clearer picture began to emerge. One evening, as the sun set, casting long shadows across the fields, Miles sat at his kitchen table surrounded by notes and photographs. The cluttered surface bore witness to countless hours spent on this quest. He pored over details, connecting dots that had once seemed distant. A knock at the door startled him. Opening it, he found Betty standing there, her expression animated. "You're not going to believe what I just heard," she said, stepping inside. "What's going on?" Miles asked, curiosity piqued. "I was talking to Helen at the post office and she mentioned something that might be important," Betty explained. "She remembers seeing Jacob with some guys just days before he disappeared. At first, she thought they were friends, but they seemed off." "Do you think she remembers anything specific?" Miles asked, his heart racing at the prospect of new information. Betty nodded. "She said she'd be willing to talk to us, but she's a bit nervous. She hasn't spoken about it much since it happened. Maybe we should go visit her together." "Absolutely," Miles replied, feeling a surge of determination. "Let's go now." They drove through familiar winding roads, the town illuminated by the fading light of day. As they approached Helen's house, Miles felt a mix of anticipation and anxiety. Would this conversation yield the breakthrough they needed? When they arrived, Helen greeted them with a hesitant smile. "Betty, Miles, it's been a while." "What brings you here?" "We wanted to talk to you about Jacob," Miles said, his voice steady. "Betty mentioned something you shared about seeing him with a group of guys before he went missing." Helen's expression shifted as memories stirred within her. "It was just a few days before everything happened." "Anything you can remember could help," Miles urged gently. "I know it's a difficult topic, but Jacob's story deserves to be told." After a moment of silence, Helen nodded and took a deep breath. "I remember the day clearly. I was standing in line at the diner when I saw Jacob outside. He was talking to a couple of guys I didn't recognize. They seemed rough, but Jacob was smiling, like he didn't have a care in the world." "Did you hear what they were talking about?" Miles asked, leaning forward. "Not much, but I remember Jacob's expression changed when they mentioned something about going out to the old quarry. It was like he hesitated for a moment. Then he laughed and said he needed to get back to work, but I could tell he was uneasy." Miles felt a knot form in his chest. The mention of the old quarry was significant. "Did you see them leave together?" "No, I didn't," she replied. "But I remember feeling uneasy. It just didn't seem like Jacob's usual crowd." "Thank you, Helen," Miles said sincerely. "This information is crucial. We're piecing together what happened, and every detail counts." As they left Helen's house, Miles felt a renewed sense of purpose. The pieces were slowly coming together, and he sensed they were getting closer to the truth. The quarry loomed large in his mind, a place filled with both memories and potential answers. That evening, Miles shared the new information with the sheriff, who was equally intrigued. "We need to investigate the quarry," the sheriff said decisively. "If Jacob was last seen there, it could lead us to answers." The next day, they organized a small group of volunteers from the community to search the quarry. The air was thick with anticipation as they arrived at the site, rugged terrain stretching out before them. Miles led the way, heart racing as they approached the water's edge. As they fanned out, scanning the area for signs of Jacob, Miles felt the weight of the moment settle over him. This was more than just a search. It was an opportunity to confront the past and honor the memory of the man who had been lost. Hours passed as they combed through the rocky landscape, searching for anything out of the ordinary. The sun climbed higher, the heat intensifying, but the group pressed on, motivated by a shared sense of purpose. Then, out of the corner of his eye, Miles spotted something glimmering near the water's edge. He rushed over, heart pounding, and knelt down to examine it. It was a piece of fabric, tattered and stained, but unmistakably familiar. "Guys, come here," he called, waving over the others. As they gathered around him, he held up the fabric, realization dawning. This looks like it could be part of Jacob's shirt. The group fell silent, the gravity of the discovery settling in. The sheriff examined the fabric closely, his expression serious. "We need to take this back to the station for analysis. It could provide vital evidence." The tension in the air was thick as they headed back to their vehicles. Miles felt a mix of hope and dread. They had uncovered something significant, yet it also served as a stark reminder of the pain associated with Jacob's disappearance. Later that evening, as the sun dipped below the horizon, painting the sky in shades of red and orange, Miles gathered the community once more at the church hall. He needed to share what had happened, to keep everyone updated and involved in the search. "Thank you all for coming tonight," he began, his voice steady despite the weight of the day's events. "We've made significant progress. Today, we found a piece of fabric that appears to belong to Jacob. This discovery is both hopeful and haunting, reminding us of the urgency of our mission." Gasps echoed throughout the room. Faces that had held expressions of hope now glimmered with concern. "What does this mean?" a man asked, his brow furrowed. "It means we're closer to uncovering the truth," Miles replied, determination unwavering. "But it also means we need to stay vigilant. The road ahead will be challenging, but together we can find the answers we seek." As discussions unfolded, people began to share their memories, each story adding depth to the investigation. The atmosphere buzzed with determination, and Miles felt a sense of hope swell within him. Jacob's memory was alive, and the community was ready to embrace it. By the end of the evening, Miles could see the transformation taking place. The crowd felt more connected than ever, united in their pursuit of truth. They were no longer just individuals mourning a loss. They were a community determined to reclaim their shared history. That night, as the stars twinkled above, Miles closed his eyes, feeling the warmth of the community surrounding him. They were embarking on a journey together, one that would honor Jacob's memory and lead them toward the truth they had all been seeking. Together, they would face the challenges ahead, united in their mission to uncover the secrets of the past. The days following the gathering were filled with a sense of urgency and purpose. Miles could feel the electricity in the air, a collective determination that had united the community. Everyone was committed to uncovering the truth about Jacob Mercer, and the sense of hope felt palpable. As Miles arrived at the sheriff's office to discuss the findings from the fabric they had discovered, he was met with a mixture of skepticism and anticipation. The sheriff greeted him with a nod, and they settled into the small conference room, the weight of the case heavy on their shoulders. "We sent the fabric for analysis to the lab," the sheriff began, his tone serious. "It'll take a few days to get results, but we should prepare ourselves for what might come next." Miles nodded, feeling a mix of anticipation and dread. What if it doesn't match? What if it's not Jacob's? "It's a possibility," the sheriff replied, leaning back in his chair. "But it's also a chance that we might finally get some answers. The important thing is that we're pursuing leads. We have to stay focused." Miles took a deep breath, the weight of the investigation pressing down on him. He thought about Jacob's family and the pain they had endured over the years. "We owe it to Jacob's family to find out what happened. They deserve closure." The sheriff nodded in agreement. "I know. We'll do everything we can to help you get those answers." As they discussed next steps, Miles felt a surge of determination. He had spoken to many people in town, and he knew they were all eager to contribute. "We should organize another gathering," he suggested. "Share updates, keep the momentum going. The community is behind us, and we need to harness that energy." "Good idea," the sheriff replied. "Let's set a date and spread the word. We want everyone to be involved." Back in his truck, Miles drove through the familiar streets of the town, feeling a sense of purpose. The landscape was dotted with memories of Jacob, places where he had laughed, played, and dreamed of a brighter future. Each corner turned reminded him of the urgency of their mission. As he prepared for the next gathering, he reached out to several volunteers, inviting them to share their thoughts and findings. The community was eager to contribute, and he could feel the excitement building. This was not just about Jacob anymore. It was about the collective spirit of the town coming together to seek the truth. On the night of the gathering, the church hall buzzed with anticipation. Familiar faces filled the seats, and as Miles took the stage, he could see the commitment in their eyes. "Thank you all for coming tonight," he began, his voice steady. "We've made significant progress in the investigation, and I want to share everything we know." He recounted the discovery of the fabric and the ongoing analysis. The mood shifted as he spoke about the potential implications. "We're still waiting for confirmation, but there's a chance this fabric is linked to Jacob. We need to stay hopeful while preparing ourselves for any outcome." The crowd listened intently, their expressions a mix of hope and concern. Miles continued, "This gathering is about more than just the investigation. It's about community. It's about honoring Jacob's memory and supporting each other as we navigate this difficult path." One man stood up, his voice filled with emotion. "We've been carrying this grief for too long. If this is our chance to find closure for Jacob's family, we have to do whatever it takes." Nods of agreement rippled through the room. Other voices chimed in, sharing their ideas for keeping the momentum alive. They discussed setting up a task force, organizing search parties, and reaching out to neighboring towns for support. Each suggestion served to empower the community, reinforcing their shared commitment to seeking the truth. As the night progressed, Miles felt a sense of unity that he had not experienced before. They were no longer just individuals bound by sorrow. They were a collective force, a community determined to honor Jacob's memory by pursuing justice and truth. When the gathering came to a close, Miles felt a surge of hope. He stood at the door, shaking hands and exchanging hugs with those leaving. The energy in the room had shifted, and he knew they were on the verge of something significant. In the days that followed, Miles continued to support the investigation alongside the sheriff's department. They received word from the lab that the fabric had indeed matched Jacob's clothing, a breakthrough that sent shockwaves through the community. As the news spread, the outpouring of emotion was palpable. People expressed their sorrow, but also their resolve to continue the search for answers. Miles knew this was a pivotal moment, one that brought them closer to understanding what had happened to Jacob. That evening, he gathered his thoughts as he sat on his porch, the cool breeze rustling the leaves of the trees. The weight of the past lingered, but he felt a sense of clarity washing over him. The community had come together, united by a shared purpose and a commitment to uncovering the truth. As the stars twinkled above, Miles closed his eyes, reflecting on the journey they had undertaken. They were not just seeking answers, they were forging a new path forward, honoring Jacob's memory with every step they took. Together, they would face the challenges ahead, united in their mission to reveal the secrets of the past and bring closure to those who had been left behind. The days following the confirmation about the fabric were tense, yet filled with purpose. Miles could sense that the community was on edge, but there was also an undercurrent of determination. They had reached a critical point in the investigation into Jacob Mercer's disappearance, and the town felt more united than ever. As he prepared for the next gathering, Miles reflected on the importance of transparency. The community had come together to honor Jacob and support one another, and it was crucial to keep everyone informed about the ongoing investigation. He wanted them to feel included in every step of the journey. On the evening of the gathering, the church hall was packed. The energy was palpable as familiar faces filled the seats, all eagerly awaiting updates. Miles stood at the front, taking a moment to absorb the sea of expressions, curiosity, hope, and a touch of apprehension. "Thank you all for coming tonight," he began, his voice steady but filled with emotion. "We have some important updates regarding our search for Jacob." He recounted the match from the lab, the weight of the discovery hanging thick in the air. "The fabric we found does belong to Jacob," he announced. There were gasps throughout the room, a mix of sorrow and determination. "This confirms that we are on the right track, but we must be prepared for the next steps in our investigation." Miles continued, "We have the support of law enforcement, and they're working diligently to follow every lead. There are plans to conduct further searches in the areas Jacob was last seen, particularly around the old quarry." A murmur of agreement rippled through the crowd. If anyone has any information, no matter how small, please come forward. We need every piece of the puzzle to ensure that Jacob's story is told and that we bring closure to his family." As he spoke, Miles could feel the community rallying around him. The weight of grief was still present, but it was overshadowed by a shared commitment to uncover the truth. There were discussions about organizing search parties to comb the areas around the quarry, and volunteers began signing up. One woman, her voice trembling, stood up. "I remember Jacob. He was so kind. I can't believe this is happening. I want to help in any way I can." Another voice chimed in. "We're all in this together. Let's make sure Jacob's name is not forgotten." Miles felt a swell of gratitude. This was more than an investigation. It was a community coming together to honor a life cut short. As the evening progressed, they brainstormed ideas for fundraisers to support the ongoing search and to help Jacob's family. After the gathering concluded, Miles lingered, shaking hands and chatting with those who remained. The discussions had ignited a fire in the community, and he could see the determination in their eyes. They were ready to take action, to stand up for Jacob and ensure that his story would not be lost to time. As he closed up the church hall for the night, Miles felt a renewed sense of purpose. He was no longer just a man searching for answers. He was a part of something much larger, a movement fueled by love, hope, and the unwavering spirit of a community united in memory. In the coming weeks, the search parties would be organized, and the town would mobilize to help discover the truth behind Jacob's disappearance. They would search the quarry, engage with the authorities, and support each other through the challenges ahead. As the stars twinkled brightly in the night sky, Miles knew that they were not alone in this journey. Together they would light the way forward, honoring Jacob's memory with every step they took.